Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to Question Time with your Mayor Andy Burnham. My name's Michelle Livesey. I work for Bauer Media, which owns radio stations across the UK, including Absolute Radio, Magic, Greatest Hits Radio, Hits Radio, and Kiss FM as well. I used to be chief reporter in Manchester, so I'm used to working alongside Andy, covering some of the really big issues in the heart of the community. So I think this event's really special because it gives the community a chance to ask questions and put issues that really matter to you to our mayor. So that's the plan tonight. I've got a list of questions here. There was loads of questions submitted, so thank you to everybody who did submit a question. I've been through them all. I've tried to pick a nice selection of them. I know that the people that have been chosen to have their questions read out are here tonight, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to actually read those questions out yourself. So you'll be given a microphone for that. And it's just a range of topics. So again, nice community feel event. Right in the middle of our Live Well festival, which is taking place across Greater Manchester. I've been covering quite a few bits around that. 200 events taking place across Greater Manchester at the minute, all community-based issues and projects. So fantastic that this is happening during those 2 weeks. Right, shall we get going then?
Okay, Michelle. Thanks to you for hosting, and Stretford Public Hall, it's great, and it looks better every time I come, actually. And thanks for coming out, everyone. I was going to say on a wet, it's not a wet, it's a lovely night, actually, isn't it? So it's good that so many of you have done that.
Okay, so we'll start with transport, I think, first. Got a question here from Samir Abidow. I don't know if Samir's in the room. Samir, are we getting a microphone? Sorry, we'll get a microphone over to you so you can ask the question.
Hiya, yes. So what can be done to make the Metrolink network more affordable for young people?
Thank you, Samir. We are already doing quite a lot. We've had 6 years of fare freezes on Metrolink because the whole vision of the B network is a low-fare, high-usage system. The R-Pass, the free bus pass that I introduced for 16 to 18s, that can be used to get half-price Metrolink off-peak or at weekends. So that's there. Beyond that, it's hard for me to, really do the same on Metrolink that I've done on buses because the Metrolink doesn't go to every part of Greater Manchester. And so, people in Wigan or Bolton would say, well, hang on, how can that be fair when we're paying towards that, but we don't get any of the benefit from it. So it's why, and also there's just a limit to how much we can keep the fares where they are. It's hard to sustain the fares as low as they are, but I'm really committed to doing that as much as I possibly can. So we are where we are with all of those policies at the moment. The truth is, the pressure is on not to kind of do any more and to sort of, if you like, if anything, raise fares, but I don't want to do that. Doing more on Metrolink and cutting it more for young people would be hard, if I'm honest, given where we currently are with the fare box in Greater Manchester. But there is a pretty good offer. And the one thing I would say is we brought in a half-price monthly for 18 to 21-year-olds. So conscious that young with an R-Pass all of a sudden hit that kind of moment when they lose it. I know it's a bit of a hard thing for them. So we've created this half-price monthly. So it'd be £40 a month bus pass. Again, it's not Metrolink, but it's fairer for us to subsidise buses for young people than it is Metrolink for the reasons that I gave.
So one of the things that quite a few questions came in on was actually about the buses, and obviously you've been talking about what you've done with the B network. But Leslie Summers got a question in the room about the availability of buses. Where's Leslie? Oh, she's right at the back.
Making you work, Rachel. Deliberate, active policy.
Hi.
Evening, Leslie.
Yeah. My concern is that the buses are not very regular. I actually would use a bus on the A56 to go from Old Trafford, Gores Hill, to Sale and Altrincham, and we only have one bus.
Which, is that the 255?
No, it's the 263. Sorry?
I'm like Blakey for Greater Manchester. I know every number of every bus in Greater Manchester now.
Yeah, and
never thought I'd have that title.
It's supposed to be every 20 minutes. It's usually only 2 in the hour, and sometimes you wait an hour. And this is the main road. And we here in this area now, we've lost our shopping area. And it's vital that we have transport to get to other shops in other areas. But I can't see how you can alter that, when you're rescheduling buses. It's not going to be easy. But people can't do a weekly shop here in this area. You need to travel out.
I hear you, Leslie. And can I just say, those who laughed when I said Blakey, you're showing your age, by the way. The young people were looking at me like, what the hell's he on about there? But anyway, we'll leave that one there. So I hear we are going to, the point of having public control of buses is to then do things to change the system to make it work. So in the old deregulation days, there was very little we could do. But now we can change things. So there are actually 2 big changes to your buses that we're announcing later this week, but I'll share it with you tonight, so you'll hear it here first. The 263, which I mentioned, which I believe goes down to Partington. No, 255. 255, sorry. I'm getting... The leader of the council is giving me a very stern look here. 255 is going to move to a 20-minute service. Now, I know that's not the be-all and end-all, but it's half an hour service at the moment, so that's a change. The 263 is going to become a night bus by the middle of this year. Again, not exactly what you're asking about, but what we're but the point being that we are putting in the improvements slowly but surely to increase frequency. Also, night bus connectivity down to Altrincham. We put in new services, a new pattern in Dunham Massey earlier this year. I appreciate it's a different part of your borough, but it's nevertheless important that everyone has got connectivity. So we are making the changes, and I heard what you've said tonight, Leslie, and I will take that back to the TFGM team.
Okay, I'm going to let this lady ask a question here.
But why not? I said I've heard what's been said. I can't promise every single improvement to every bus tomorrow, but I've heard what's been said, and I'm prepared to go back and ask if that could be improved. So it is an answer, hopefully.
I think we've got another question about transport.
It's just a comment. Obviously, the 255.
Oh, there you go.
The 254 and 253 all used to terminate at Flixton. They didn't go as far as Partington. The 252 used to go from Manchester to Partington. And the beauty of that was it didn't get stopped on the Mile Road when there was flooding. And that's the problem now. That Manchester route, the 252 from Manchester to Partington has gone. And the 255 continues from Flixton through to Partington. But very often during the winter, it gets flooded or it gets blocked because of snow. So it was better as it was before.
Okay, well, I hear that as well. I mean, we've got the services under constant review, and what we're trying to do is, as and when we can, we're trying to put those improvements in. I think if you look at the overall picture, the B Network has made buses quite significantly better in Greater Manchester as a whole. The data bears that out. But we're not in a sort of thing where we're complacent, and it's not where it needs to be. There's a lot more that needs to be done. The thing I've got to do though is balance, where we started, keeping fares low with then I can't do everything because, if I put more and more services in, then the fares would have to go up to pay for more and more services. I've also done something earlier this month that was quite a big commitment from myself, Tom, the leader of Stretford, the other 9 leaders, and that was removing the 9:30 restriction on older and disabled people's bus passes. Again, giving people the ability to travel 24/7, we think was the right thing to do. We're one of the few places to do it in the country, very few in England do what we've done. But again, it's a big commitment. So I've got to balance fares and concessions with frequency of services, and I'm trying my best to sort of make it as good as we can make it. In the long run, I think we need to increase the sort of support for buses in terms of the revenue to support these policies, and to answer the question from the back and what you're saying. And the answer to that, it's controversial to some. I'm not, it can't be the case that the council tax is the only place to sort of create some support to increase the services. So certainly from 2028, but we hope from 2027, Greater Manchester has been asking for the power to introduce what's called an overnight visitor levy, or a tourist levy. Because, we're a growing city region. It's not fair, in my view, to say it's only the residents that pay for improvements to the bus service. People who visit here, who use them as well, should make a contribution, and that's what that would mean. So the kind of charge you pay if you're, staying in a place in France or Italy or Germany, it's very common to pay a few euros or a few pounds. We've been given permission to bring that in, and that's what we will do. But significantly, that will support the expansion of the B network to be able to give a better answer next time, around the new services that people want to see. We just don't get the same subsidy as London. We never have had, and consequently, we have to work quite hard to make it add up. But what do I prioritise? Fares, frequency, or more routes? I'm trying to do all three, is the truth, but I can't do everything I would want to do on all three. That's basically the bottom line.
Okay, thank you. We've got another question here that actually I think relates to transport, so I'll ask it here, but it's actually come under the health and well-being section. This is from Lucy Power. Lucy, microphone's on its way.
Thank you. This is a long question, so please bear with me, everybody. I'm a single parent, wellbeing volunteer and PhD researcher who's been disabled by multiple sclerosis over 30 years. I'm a homeowner living and driving in South Manchester. Since 2020, you have implemented extensive changes to pavements and roadside parking bays in my area, shrinking and redesignating pavements as hybrid spaces to prioritise cycle paths, and removing all general parking bays and specific opportunities for disabled blue badge drivers to park close to destinations. In the last 2 months, I've received 3 parking tickets when displaying my blue badge for parking, either where I've parked for years without any previous problems, or on double yellow line zones, which are now the only nearby parking options for disabled drivers since the roadside bays were removed, for parking 9 minutes outside the newly created limited time period rules. Disabled people can only park on roadside yellow lines between 10 and 4 p.m. now in these zones. I've experienced firsthand and watched others being jostled out of the way on shared pavements by bicycles, or struggling to navigate these spaces with wheelchairs, walkers, white sticks or canes. Does your new green strategy that talks about pedestrians and cyclists just determine that the disabled and elderly don't matter anymore? Or does this recent set of changes reflect a lack of understanding about the very basic and simple needs of vulnerable citizens? And a supplemental question, please. You will talk about encouraging vulnerable citizens to use public transport at this point, but many disabled people are too ill to use public transport, or the closest transport link is too far from a vulnerable person's home or destination, and/or involves navigating those frightening hybrid walkways I describe. So this isn't an option. In these cases, using a car is vital for a vulnerable person's quality of life and well-being. Would you agree that the dichotomy between the facilities created for able-bodied pedestrians and cyclists and those not considered for vulnerable and disabled citizens illustrates an urgent issue that Greater Manchester should address and resolve immediately? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. Thank you, and very clear and very reasonably put. I mean, the first thing and I don't wish this to sound avoiding what you've said, but I've not made those changes. So, the highway is not my direct responsibility. That is a council responsibility. I can, though, raise those issues. Do you live in Manchester, or am I taking as...
I live in Old Trafford, but the Old Trafford area where I've just taken part in consultation about the new
Okay, but you live in Trafford, don't you? So
Just over the border in Old Trafford, so it's fair to say this is why I talk about the Greater Manchester area, because we're not talking about one region. We don't all live in these little pockets and isolated bubbles of the one.
No, and you cross the borders, and of course. Is the problem more the parking at home or when you go into Chorlton?
I try and travel anywhere to shop or socialise in my local area, yes.
I mean, most of our councils are pretty good when it comes to disabled parking, and okay, yeah.
In Chorlton, in the last 5 years, they spent £25 million introducing the new cycleway system. They took away at least 50 designated public parking spaces, of which obviously the new badger holders would be able to use all of those. They also removed all of the areas of the roadsides that were double yellow lines where disabled people could have parked, because now there are cycle lanes in the way. That can't happen. They also took away the public parking car park, in the centre of Chorlton, which had 8 disabled bays, and they've replaced that with 2 disabled bays. I had to try and go to Chorlton Library the other day in order to facilitate a volunteer-led exhibition in the library there. I had to park 2 streets away on double yellow lines. I had to walk 2 streets away to get to the library, and I've been led to believe by my friend who's done some research into it that the actual rules for disabled access for people in a wheelchair are 50 metres from the place you need to get to and 100 metres for somebody like me who isn't in a wheelchair. At the moment, using Chorlton just as a working example, because it's one of the most recent places that's been affected by these new changes, this just doesn't apply. And if you are a disabled person now, visiting somewhere like Chorlton has become very stressful. All of the parking tickets I received were in Chorlton.
Okay, well, I will. It's obvious, that other people have experienced something of the same. I mean, I will feed that back to Manchester City Council. I mean, I've not made those decisions. I've not designed that infrastructure. So I'm not just, I don't want to kind of give the impression to you that I'm responsible for something that I'm not, because then, it wouldn't be an honest answer. What I will do, though, is feed back to Manchester City Council what you've said. And I am aware that other people have fed back, on that. That has been a controversial scheme, and lots of people have expressed opinions. The thing I would say is, when you ask why is that infrastructure going in, obviously we do not want a situation where we've got bikes, food deliveries, other things on pavements, and that is a worse scenario. What we're trying to do, just if you could just answer, what we're trying to do is create a situation where there is segregated space for pedestrians, for people using bikes, e-bikes, scooters, and then obviously the road space. And it's not easy to allocate that space given the narrowness of some of our roads. But obviously that's the safest thing to do, to allow each of those categories of users that segregated space. What I wouldn't, and I hope you're not taking it like this, what I wouldn't support is the lack of availability of disabled parking spaces. Every district centre should have a sufficient supply. Clearly, that's not the case from your point of view in Chorlton. So I will just take that back and feed that back to Manchester City Council. Because I understand how it's very limiting in terms of where you want to go and what you want to do. And the rules, I think, that you quote absolutely are. I know that those are the guidelines, aren't they, in terms of how your distance from where you want to go. So I will, if I could take your details, your name and address, and I will get you an answer from the City Council.
Okay, thank you. I guess all of this transport network that you're creating, the public transport, getting people out of their cars and on bikes and walking is all a part of the environment and protecting climate change, etc. We move now on to that topic. So is Patricia Allen in the room? Patricia's just over there. Oh, we've got a microphone. It's to the other side. There you go.
Hi.
Hi, Patricia.
Greater Manchester has some of the most carbon-emitting and energy-inefficient homes in Europe, causing health problems, poverty and climate change. Why aren't we doing more to respond to this crisis in Greater Manchester, given that in doing so, we will create hundreds of thousands of jobs?
Yes, that's a good question. We are doing quite a bit, probably not enough, but we have a retrofit task force in Greater Manchester which is looking at this very issue, and we have dedicated funding from the government to retrofit homes, and we're on a path to hopefully retrofitting all homes by 2038. It's not realistic for me to say to you that we could do it any more quickly than that. But I'm really, I'm for the reasons you give, this is about improving people's homes, lowering their bills, creating good jobs for young people, but all people. To me, it makes complete sense to do it. What I've found, and I've really pushed this agenda, it doesn't feel that the industry yet is properly set up to move at the pace that we need. There was a scheme, actually, it was a Channel 4 programme. I don't know if you saw it, Michelle, or anyone here saw it. It was a semi in Stretford, actually. I don't know if you follow Guy Martin. I think he was the person who did it, and I was interviewed in it. It was called The House with No Bills. He set out to see if you could actually, from a typical British semi, which is what this house was, kind of remove the bills and just have it as a completely run from renewable energy. And he found that you could, but it's really challenging to do it given the way in which construction currently is, the skills base, etc. So we would agree with that. What we think we should do in the sort of nearer term, and Tom, leader of Trafford, leads on Green City Regions issues for us, does a brilliant job. What we think we should do, rather than waiting for everything to sort of come right, we think there's a real opportunity to put more rooftop solar in at scale across particularly homes for social rent, council homes in Greater Manchester, because that is deliverable now. We know for a fact you can really reduce people's bills immediately. And it's a sort of good thing to do, whatever else you decide to do with the rest of the fabric of those homes. So our thinking is currently to accelerate rooftop solar because it can do something meaningful about the cost of living crisis for people. But your point's a good one.
Okay, I think we've got a question here. I think there's a microphone coming on that side. That's it, yeah.
Hi Andy, I just want to know what the plans are and what percentage of funding there is for readily existing housing stock condition with regards to build baby build and, like that lady said about retrofit. They're generally based on new builds, but the readily existing housing stock is in such substandard condition that it really needs addressing. It really desperately needs addressing. I mean, my own home where I live was absolutely destroyed in a sewage flood that was due to landlord negligence. My home ended up containing the sewage of 55 homes, and it still remains in that same condition today with my entire contents in it. And that happened in November 21. Now, the sanctions that my landlord should have faced, they were completely overlooked by the Ombudsman, by the local authority. However, my landlords have received millions, hundreds of millions of pounds in funding and have not addressed any of the issues. People are living in dire disrepair and it's killing them. I could never return home and I ended up homeless for nearly a year in my landlord's full knowledge, and they were happy to receive rent on a weekly basis. They receive full service charge, and I've not even been reimbursed for the belongings in that home that are locked in, detained to this day 4.5 years later.
Go on.
Now, I really do feel strongly that local authorities, councils, environmental health really need to be clamping down on landlords that evade the condition of their stock.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. Really strongly agree. And it's actually really timely that you've asked this question. So we've brought through a Greater Manchester Good Landlord Charter. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's based on our Good Employment Charter. And what we are doing is we are linking that charter to the available funding for home improvement and retrofit. So you don't get to access it unless we have accredited you as a landlord to be willing, good enough to receive that funding. So that is a scheme. We actually launched it last week, and it's designed to recognise and support the good landlords that are out there, but really allow the public in Greater Manchester to see the landlords who won't sign up to the Greater Manchester Good Landlord Charter, and that will start to allow them to differentiate between the two. More broadly, I favour a much tougher approach on what you are saying. I don't believe you should get the right in this country to rent out homes that damage people's health, physical health, and their mental health. If I look across the city region, the number of homes that are beneath the decent home standard in the private rented sector, it's a significant number, probably between 30 and 40%. Many of those homes are, if you like, homes where the landlord is in receipt of public money from the benefit system. We shouldn't allow this anymore, that people are able to kind of rake in public money through the benefit system, not reinvest any of it in the fabric of those homes, damage the health of the people who live inside, dragging down the community because they look poorly maintained. I favour a really strong approach to this, which is, three warnings, if you like, to bring your home up to an acceptable standard, or face compulsory purchase. I'm putting that idea forward to the government because, from my point of view as Mayor of Greater Manchester, I don't think I can achieve what I would want for everybody in Greater Manchester with housing in the position that it's in today. I personally think, people may have different views, but the sell-off of homes in the 80s has left us in a devastating position, because we're still losing more homes every year than we are building through. We lose more from right to buy than we build, but many of those homes have gone into the private rented sector, absent landlords who care nothing for the communities where those homes are based. They just take the money, they don't invest in them. I don't believe we should accept it anymore. You should not get the right to rent out a home that damages the health of people inside. You wouldn't get the right to go out and sell food that damaged the health of people when they ate it, or any other service, to be honest. Why do they get the right to do it with a home? It's just wrong, and I sympathise very much with you with the position that you've been in.
So what I'd like to know is, how are you basing the comparables on this good landlord in three strikes and you're out sort of scheme? Is it going to go off the regulator of social housing's approach and gradings?
I think it goes off something called EPC3, which is an energy efficiency rating, isn't it, for homes. And it's not perfect, but it is a good proxy as to whether or not the home is properly maintained. Because homes that have poor fabric, not properly maintained, will struggle to meet what's called EPC3. So that's the guide that we use, and we would use that in relation to the, when I say whether people would be accredited under the Good Landlord Charter, they would have to achieve that standard as a minimum for all of their homes.
Who's the head of the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health this week, and she's trying to take the lead on all environmental health standards. Now, my home was failed on the HHSRS. It was failed on the asbestos survey. The asbestos survey was manipulated. And then I spent 2.5 years submitting evidence to the Ombudsman of Housing, who then failed the case. So what my argument is, how are you actually basing the good landlording on if the cases such as my own don't even make it to the regulator because the Ombudsman's failed to disclose that evidence?
So it's a really good question. And we've talked about transport, and I, in my early years of mayor, I've really focused on that. More recently, I've really focused on building a different education system in Greater Manchester with a equal technical route alongside the university route, because I passionately believe we fail kids who want technical education. I'm only going to be honest with you, I am now turning my attention to the enormity of the housing crisis that we've got in Greater Manchester. And I'm beginning to think about how can I get a grip on this massive challenge. We have a supply challenge, so we have to be building more council and social homes than we're losing. And we're getting close. We think we'll hit that tipping point in 2027 or 2028. So and there's been a lot of new social home starts in this borough recently, which is really encouraging. We've got to do something about more supported homes for people and homelessness, which I've obviously had a big focus on. But this question of housing standards it's hard for me to get a full grip on it from this level, but we do have a renters reform bill that's just gone through Parliament. The key thing I can say to you is not necessarily going to help you in your situation. What I want by the end of this decade, and we've got Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service with us this evening. I'm really grateful to Sarah and all of her colleagues at GMFRS for agreeing to work with us on the idea of every Greater Manchester resident, and this is our policy, this is what we're trying to do. I would have wanted you in your position to have the right to request a property check if you had an unresponsive, negligent landlord. And I want every resident of Greater Manchester to have that right by the end of this decade. Now, I wish I could say to you I could enforce it tomorrow. I just can't because of the scale of what that would mean for the fire service and the number of checks that they just wouldn't have that ability to do it. But with our 10 councils, we are building a system. We just piloted it in Eccles recently. And for me, it's absolutely part of what we should be empowering our residents to achieve. Any resident here in rented accommodation should have the ability to call in the authorities to say, is this landlord putting me in a safe place? Is this landlord doing what's right to prevent fire risk and everything else? And that is what we're building towards. But I couldn't promise you here tonight that we could do it next year or the year after. It's a really challenging thing to introduce.
All right, I think there's quite a few questions on housing, actually. I've got one submitted, but let's go to this gentleman here because there's a mic on its way.
I was just going to sort of mention that a lot of the organisations now that are taking housing are large businesses, and they're looking at it as making money, which they can clearly do. And it's challenging them to put them in a point where it doesn't become economically viable for them. So instead of compulsory purchasing a house from someone, you compulsory purchase it for bricks and mortar. So if you buy a house for 200,000 quid and you only get 90,000 quid paid back for it, it then starts to remove those people from the market, because the only way to do it is not make it economically viable for them, because their sole purpose is to make money. They're buying housing stock. They know they've got you by the shorts, and literally you can't move with that. And it's then having the ability to take that housing stock back into control, because at the moment I'm come from street homeless, still waiting for a permanent residence, and it's how difficult it is to get to that point of view. And you also have landlords taking advantage of the system by manipulating and bending the rules to get extra income on top of the rental for that. And we're paying it, and we're lining the pockets of landlords.
I agree.
People are paying tax for that, and it's to do that. So you say it's not economically viable for you. They find another market, because if you don't do that, they won't move out because they want to make money. They don't care what happens to the people.
I mean, what I'm trying to do is, I agree very strongly with what you say. I mean, what I'm trying to do is recognise the good landlords out there, because they are there, and there may be some in this audience tonight. And I think it's important that we don't do down all of them, because some of them try and do the right thing. Decent people, they try and do the right thing. Yes, they need to make money, but they do it in a responsible, respectful way. And the charter is meant to say, right, they are those kind of people. That's why, a good landlord charter. Same as we've done with the good employment charter. These are good companies. They look after their staff properly. So we're trying to do the same. But alongside that, I want that system of a property check and then tougher enforcement and CPO powers. And I do think that regime needs not to allow, at the moment, it's too easy for people to sort of fight back against, it's too much weighted to the other side. Whereas I think you're right. people who are profiteering out of a home that's damaging somebody's health, and particularly where that profit is generated via the public purse from the benefit system, it's just wrong. And we could go to any community across Greater Manchester and you could see streets that were bought up for very little money in the 90s, when we were really in a bad economic position, and those properties have ended up in the hands of people all over the country, not even in the country, and they don't care at all what happens to the tenants of those homes or the effect that they have on the communities. And I think we've got to get a grip on, personally, I think we've got to get, like we've got public control of the buses, we need more public control of more of our housing stock, because actually the cost of buying it through CPO would be offset by the savings you'll make in the benefit system. So, there's a big answer to what you're both raising. I don't think Parliament is moving fast enough to enable us to really get stuck in. But we are beginning to make inroads on our thinking on housing, and it's kind of the next agenda, really, I would say, in Greater Manchester, alongside building a lot more council and social homes again. And, I think we should talk about council housing, not always social housing. The reason why that's important, that's putting it back under democratic oversight. The direct control of councils who then are able to put in place, better policies to get those homes to people who need them. To the credit of this council, I mentioned building more social homes. Manchester City Council are now building the first social homes in the city centre for 40 years on the old Boddington's Brewery site. So, there is some real change starting to happen in housing policy in Greater Manchester. It just takes time to get back to where we need to be.
Would the same apply for social housing? Because there's some very good social housing providers, and there are some, should we say, that skirt quite close, if not over the line that they should be playing for, and it should be taking that control back in. Because if they're not doing what they should do, why should we be paying the money? Because a lot of the board of these social housings get bonuses that are more than the Prime Minister gets. How can we justify that when they're basically a junior department within the government, to put it into a sort of perspective for it? Yeah. And it's looking at it that way.
I don't think we can ever lose sight of the fact that a 2-year-old boy in Rochdale was killed by the damp and mould in his social home. And that is a shocking state of affairs. Unbelievable. It's what I've described. It should be like here's another reference for the oldies in the audience. It should be the Cathy come home moment of this generation. The fact that happened, and that should just be something that kind of makes everybody wake up to the housing challenge. So the Greater Manchester Good Landlord Charter has a section of it that is about social landlords. And it will judge them to a higher standard than the private rented sector. It also has a section for any students with us tonight, purpose-built student accommodation. So a separate section looking particularly at that type of rented accommodation. I happen to agree with you. I don't like the way things went in, to be honest, under all governments, including the one I was in, when things that were in the public sector were kind of hived into the kind of an arm's length space. Or then academy schools, and all that did is it took them away from accountability, and often it does follow that then the salaries float upwards and the accountability isn't there. It was a source of great sort of frustration to our councils that something called the Golden Share was abolished by the Cameron government, and the Golden Share gave councils by right the ability to have a majority on those boards. It was a majority, I think I'm right in saying, or certainly significant representation on those boards. When that was abolished, some of the housing providers, and that one in Rochdale was a case in point, pushed the councillors off the board. Salaries started to go up. I mean, we do have really good social landlords in Greater Manchester, but you can't vouch for all of them in the way that you're describing. So the landlord charter will apply to them. And it will differentiate those who are not. And finally, we've got to get stuck into these issues. Housing is fundamental. If you've not got a good home, you can't have a good life, can you? You can't have good health. Your kids won't get a good education. We say it's got to be housing first. You've got to sort out housing as the main thing that people need sorted out in their lives. How many of our kind of fellow citizens in Greater Manchester are going tonight, either worrying about eviction, worrying about the state of the home? You know, it's too many. It's too many. And it's why the housing crisis needs to come to the top of the tree in terms of Westminster politics. It should be the biggest issue that they're grappling with every day, rather than getting a look in here and there. And they often only come to it in terms of building more homes. Well, it's a much more serious and complex issue than that.
Is Joel Troop in the room? Joel, there he is. Joel's got a question about social rent. Oh, there's a mic coming.
Thank you. I'm here with Tom and Yvonne, and we're all from Social Homes for Trafford, which is a local campaign group. Obviously, recently, the Old Trafford Regeneration Mayoral Development Corporation was launched, and as part of that project, there's going to be 15,000 new homes delivered, I believe. So given what you've been talking about now, and also given that campaign groups such as Social Homes for Manchester propose that 30% of any new development, more than 10 houses, should be for social rent, do you agree that like a really significant proportion of those 15,000 homes should be for social? I mean, council, you mentioned council housing, that would be the gold standard. And but also, would you agree to meet with us as residents to kind of talk about how we could get towards that number, how that could be achieved?
I'll happily meet with you for certain, and I fully support, you know, what you're trying to do. Could it be 30%? We're not funded at a level nationally at the moment to be able to achieve that, but the funding for social rent homes is increasing. To be fair, it was one of our MPs, Angela Rayner, when she was in the government, she got a £39 billion fund together for social and affordable housing over the 10 years. I have said, I think the government should spend that 39 billion only on council and social housing, not the affordable housing, because often it isn't affordable to people, is it, when the rent actually is kind of calculated. I would say the public investment that she got should be solely dedicated on council and social homes. I think we need a building programme similar to the post-war government, you know, where we're just building thousands and thousands of council and social homes. Why? Because in the end, as I said before, it would pay for itself because the benefits bill would drop. You know, when people are not... The benefit system is currently chasing rents in the private rented sector. It's called local housing allowance. It has to kind of follow what the landlords are doing to kind of, you know, make sure that people can afford to rent their homes. If you had a much bigger council and social rented stock again, you wouldn't be doing that, and the benefits, the housing benefit bill, would be much lower than it currently is. I mean, the other thing I would say is the government came in with a commitment to build 1.5 million homes. I think it should change that target now to building 500,000 council and social homes. You know, that is the scale of what they should be doing, I think, in terms of a programme akin to the programme of the post-war Labour government. So I agree with what you're saying. We're not funded at a level to do what you're saying, but I'm talking for myself and Tom and the other leaders. We would go as far as we could go, and therefore we don't disagree with the aims of your campaign.
The lady in the middle there.
Yes to a me.
Thank you. Hello, Andy.
Hi.
That brings me to a point that the journalists at the Mill have been talking about recently. They're talking about the contract that Manchester City Council have had with Renica, the developer that's been building the multi-storey developments in Manchester. And I think I had a quick look at it, and I think they were saying out of 10,000 new properties that had been built, only about 500 of them were affordable houses, or could be classed, as you say, as affordable housing. But Manchester City Council have lent taxpayers' money to Renica to build those buildings. So first question is, how can that be good value for the people of Manchester, especially the ones that are trying to get onto the housing market? And two, what do you think we should be doing? Because there are developers wanting to build properties, There are developers obviously needing taxpayers' money to do that. How can the likes of the Mayor of Greater Manchester ensure that those developers are delivering something, delivering housing stock that is useful to people of Manchester?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And it's a really topical one as well, because it's in the news a lot, as you say. The fund is actually the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, so it's my organisation that lets those loans. This was created by George Osborne in 2015 and Sir Howard Bernstein, and it was never a programme about affordable housing. It was a programme that was principally about the growth of the city. Because what was happening in Manchester at that time was there were commercial developments, and because these are commercial schemes, as you're rightly pointing to, these were commercial schemes that had planning permission across city centre Manchester, but they could not be built because London-based commercial finance wouldn't back Manchester schemes because it had a downer on here. You know, well, that'll be risky, we're not doing that, don't fund that. So Howard persuaded George Osborne to create a fund that would let commercial rate loans to those organisations because the market wasn't doing it. So they were never about, if I'm honest, affordable housing. It was about kickstarting the growth of the city to build homes and offices that then would increase the size of the economy. And that's happened. We've had average economic growth of 3.1% over the last decade, and that policy, to be fair, has played a part in it. But what it has done, we've been able to keep the profit from those loans. And the profit of those loans is paying for some of the policies that I was talking about before, the Greater Manchester Good Landlord Charter, the property check system that we've introduced. We're investing in new enforcement apprentices in our local authorities. And actually it has funded some truly affordable and supported housing through some of the as I say, the recycled effect of the loans. So it's an oddity because it was a specific vehicle that was created to correct a problem here, which is that Manchester had potential for growth, but the commercial markets in London would not fund our city. Why? Because that won't work up there, it's all too risky, nobody will buy them, and the truth of the matter is they failed us because actually those schemes were viable. So it's a complicated one to explain, but I hope I have explained it.
How can you make that more useful to what you're trying to achieve as we move forward? Because I've actually lived in one of the apartments and they are owned by people who live outside of the country and in different parts of the country, and they're rented at very high rates. That isn't sustainable forever. And what we need is housing for people of Manchester in Manchester. So how can you get those relationships to work for us moving forward so that you can achieve what you're trying to achieve in terms of affordable and public housing stock?
Yeah, I mean, the priority at the time was to get away the schemes that could be made to stack up commercially, but they were never going to deliver the homes for people here that they could truly afford. But Manchester City Council is doing that. I referenced the homes at the Boddington's brewery site. So they are social homes in the city centre being built. They have a plan for Victoria North, which I think they're talking of 15,000 social and affordable homes, on the land up from Cheetham Hill through it's a whole swathe of development that they're bringing forward there. So the City Council actually has, a major social home building programme. So does Salford. Salford have been in surplus for building more social homes than they're losing. So the two city councils are actually doing a lot more on council and social rent than they've been doing for decades, if I'm honest with you. It will come through more and more in time. But that fund was never going to be all I'm trying to say to you, that fund was never going to be the vehicle because it wasn't set up to do that, basically.
All right. I think we'll take a break from housing and move on to policing, actually. Is Robert Oakes in the room? Right in the middle there, down the aisle. Who will get there first?
Oh, thank you. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Robert.
My question is about the new white paper that's been put forward by the government regarding policing reform.
Yeah.
On the one hand, centralising certain functions does make sense. It's economically more viable. Centralised procurement, that does make sense across the local policing authorities. How do you envisage it working for Greater Manchester? Are we going to get more community-led policing, and does it lead to more police officers actually on the streets and in the communities?
Do you mind if I ask why you asked the question? Because it's obviously, it's a big topic, isn't it? But are you involved in policing yourself? Or?
I'm not. No, I work in the education sector.
Yeah, no worries. So for those who don't know, there are 43 police forces, or probably you do know that, in England and Wales, 43 police forces. And some of them are actually really quite small and struggle with sort of specialist crime. And it's long been talked about. I was in the Home Office as a minister when Charles Clarke, as Home Secretary, tried to do this, and it didn't work then. I'm not against what the government is trying to do, but I would put down some heavy caveats. And I would definitely say, do not come here to start chopping up Greater Manchester Police, or indeed merging it with Cheshire or Lancashire or wherever, because I don't personally believe mega police forces will keep that focus on neighbourhood policing, will keep the accountability to you, the residents. In Scotland, they went to Police Scotland, if you followed that debate a number of years ago. People definitely didn't feel that improved neighbourhood policing. They felt it did the opposite. We've been on a journey with Greater Manchester Police. I can confidently say to you all tonight, the police force you've got now is unrecognisable to the one I encountered when I came in as mayor in 2017 because of what they have done, the leadership that the Chief Constable has provided. He is regarded as the best Chief Constable in the country. His deputy is with us tonight, and I believe he's the best deputy in the country, and I'm not going to take anyone who believes otherwise, Terry, so just so you know that. We're very lucky. We're a very well-led police force. You may have different experiences, like with the buses. You may have one experience and you might hear me say something. Overall, crime is down in Greater Manchester. Crime is down in Trafford overall. Neighbourhood crime is down. Now, I know there'll be examples where you're saying, well, no, it's not good enough in this way and this is up. And, of course, there are those things. But Greater Manchester Police is now back at a level of police officers that is above the 2010 level when the cuts started. I really would fear a reform programme that started to merge us with Merseyside or Cheshire or somewhere else. It just, to my mind, wouldn't work. I am going to say to the Home Secretary and the Home Office, I am open, however, to GMP becoming more and more of a provider of the specialist policing to those neighbouring forces, providing some of the things that they would find difficult to provide, specialist firearms or other things. But I'm not going to accept the merger of Greater Manchester Police with any other police force. And I believe the Deputy Mayor, who's also a local resident, is here tonight. I'm going to maybe see if Kate wants to say something. But it's not just my position, it's your position as well, Kate, isn't it? And we really want to, we're open to reform, but we're not open to, as I say, merger-type reform. Elsewhere, you've got some tiny police forces in the south. Some of them should probably be consolidated, but don't come looking here because the arrangement we've got is working.
Totally agree with everything Andy has said, obviously. We get real advantages from the fact that Greater Manchester Police absolutely matches the geography of the Mayoral Combined Authority and absolutely matches the geography of Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service and absolutely matches the geography of Greater Manchester Probation Service as well, because it means we can actually raise and spend money as a single system rather than having to negotiate lots of different arrangements with different parts of government and chopping out boundaries and doing a bit of it here and a bit of it over there. And I'll just give one example, Andy, which I think is a really good one. So, as you know, Andy raises a precept for Greater Manchester Police every year. He also has a mayoral precept which he can raise for Transport for Greater Manchester. And one of the things that Andy has done for the year we're just about to start in April is use some of that transport precept income to fund police officers from GMP on the transport network, PCSOs, and transport safety officers from TFGM. Now, we can do that because Andy controls all of those budgets through the precept and then setting the budgets for GMP and TFGM. He couldn't do that if a bit of the Greater Manchester Police effort was actually having to go over to Lancashire. He wouldn't control that budget. He wouldn't be able to say that we could put police officers there. And indeed, we wouldn't want to, would we, Andy? That wouldn't be our problem. So I think it's really important that we protect that absolute mapping of Greater Manchester Police, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, also the Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, so we can do your decent homes visits that you were talking about, Andy. It really works for us here, and we're going to fight really hard to protect what we've got in Greater Manchester. And if other parts of the country want to copy us, that's fine, but we're not messing with what we've got in Greater Manchester.
Well, certainly not. Well said, Kate.
Can we get a mic to the gentleman on the end?
Hi, Andy. So first things, I want to start off actually on a compliment with how well you and Greater Manchester Police responded with the incident at the Central Mosque a few weeks ago, and obviously with the synagogue as well. It's obviously times like that where communities kind of feel quite isolated and quite worried in terms of what's actually going on. Are we safe to go to the mosque with the obviously rise of the right wing? So thank you for that to all of you on the front bench and yourself, Andy. What I want to come to was, I've got two questions for you. I'll be quick. One is, Greater Manchester Police are facing a £32 million shortfall this year. Is there an update to that? And what conversations have happened there? And the second thing is as well, if we can police certain parts of this country, like the Metropolitan and whatnot, and stop marches from going on in terms of, you know, supporting Palestine and stuff like that, why can't we stop these right-wing racist protests that are happening in Manchester that come here and try to pit us against each other? Because Manchester's not that type of city. The politicians are fantastic in Greater Manchester. The police are fantastic in Greater Manchester and how we deal with it. You know, you can't, I've never, growing up, seen a Jew fighting against a Muslim or a Muslim fighting against a Jew or vice versa with a Christian or anything like that. So the politicians in clearly in Manchester have got the terminology and the wording right. Why can't we stop those protests from persistently keep coming to Manchester over the years? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You've raised some really crucial issues there. And we've got the Deputy Chief, and I don't know whether Terry wants to say anything or Kate to add to what I'm about to say. Firstly, I think it's really appreciated what you said about the response to the synagogue and the recent event at Manchester Central Mosque. One thing I want you to know is I've asked Greater Manchester Police as part of the precept that I give them. So every year I give them a precept. I want improvements for you from the precept that I give them. So last year, picking up on what Kate was saying, I asked them to support Travel Safe live chat. I don't know if people are aware of this, but if you are on the B Network or using the B Network app, if you go into Travel Safe live chat, we particularly know this is true for women on the transport system feeling intimidated or harassed or whatever. You go on there, and if you start a chat, that is with a GMP call handler or chat handler. And it's an amazing innovation, which is the only service of its kind in the world where you can instantly connect with a member of police staff from a bus or from a tram in Greater Manchester. And already we've seen people arrested who've been harassing women and girls on the transport system. But the thing I've asked for this year is a standard around hate crime, to pick up what you've said. Hate crime ripples right through a community. If you don't reply to it properly, and therefore if people feel safe going to their place of worship, hate crime has a corrosive effect if it's not dealt with like right there and then. And the Chief Constable did a good thing when he came in as chief. He set a service standard for burglary so that everybody gets a personal attendance by a police officer when they've been burgled. What we're saying is we want a similar hate crime standard so that we don't allow that kind of ripple of fear in a whole community, and we deal with it right there. And that's something that we'll be working on and saying more about as this year progresses. So then, to answer your question directly, we've not stopped marches over Palestine because we're the kind of city region that allows people's right to protest. We're the city of Peterloo and the suffragettes, and through the years, people have come onto our streets and fought for things and fought for changes that have benefited people. You have to apply that then to people who you may not necessarily agree with. And you're referencing some marches that we've seen recently. The answer to your question is we should facilitate when people legitimate, but when people are coming to cause trouble and to discriminate, that is different. The problem is the threshold for banning a march is currently a very high threshold, and it has to be Home Secretary approved. And I think I'm right in saying, Terry, that it's threat to life, I think, is the threshold of serious public disorder causing harm and significant harm, or Terry will know it more than me. So it's kind of not what we've done, but obviously when I see those images from a few weeks ago, people just coming and actually Nazi salutes on our streets. What kind of patriots are these people? I mean, I cannot get my head around how that could be anything other than utterly offensive to 99% of people, and more possibly in Greater Manchester. But that's what they did. And then attacking police officers. How is that the kind of action of people who deem themselves to be patriots? So we did make public comment. The leader of Manchester City Council did. That is just not welcome. But the issue is, the legal threshold for banning a march is very high. And we've been a city that's traditionally said people can come onto our streets and express their view, but on condition that they're not coming to harm someone else or intimidate somebody else. But I'm sorry to say that some of those marches are coming with that intention to make people here feel fearful, and it's not acceptable. But could we ban them? Well, the law doesn't necessarily work to do that. So I've tried. It's a really fair question you've asked. I hope I've answered your question directly, but you know where we stand, you know the way we work. This whole city region has been based right back to the cotton workers who wouldn't handle slave-picked cotton. It's been based on partnership between people, about our common humanity, working together. And that's why I kind of feel that a politics that pits people and communities against each other is actually the antithesis of what Greater Manchester has always been. So you know where we stand, you know what we're about, but at the same time, we're not banners. If we're not, we do allow people to express their views, whether sometimes whether we agree with them or not. But they should do it respectfully, and they absolutely should never come onto our streets and with those Nazi salutes. That is absolutely, utterly outrageous and offensive to people who fought here. People who are serving now. I just cannot believe how they can think that is anything other than abhorrent. But Terry, I'll leave the rant there, and I'll hand the microphone to you if you wanted to add.
Thanks, Andy. First of all, thanks for the comments. And on a personal note, I mean, we brought in about 300 officers, cancelled the days off that day, and the kindness that we put an officer outside every mosque, the kindness that a number of my staff were treated to by the mosque was pretty overwhelming, actually, so thank you. In respect of protest, I would echo a lot of what Andy said, really. So I transferred from Lancs nearly 5 years ago now as DEP. I'm not sure, I don't think I'm the best one, but I've survived the longest in the country, which might mean that I could do half a job, but I've not known a weekend without protest in Manchester. And I actually, as somebody who grew up in GM. I think it's part of the richness of Manchester, actually. And most weekends, there are policing operations for protest. Most weekends, there's a little testy moment now and again, but that's part of life, and that's part of democracy, and that's part of Manchester. But I do understand and I do respect the different views in respect of our high-tempo weekends, of which we do have a number. And the legislation here, it's important to know, and without boring you with the complete ins and outs, that the bar, so you've got two sides to this. One is a march, and one is a static protest. A march, in my 30 years of policing, and I've done EDLs and all sorts of stuff in the bad past of protest, I've not known in the Northwest it to reach a threshold that the Home Secretary would legally be able to sign it off. In effect, we've got to be able to, in all honesty, say to the Home Secretary, we can't cope. Now, we are the second biggest force in the country, and for most occasions, it might mean that we have to cancel or leave or rest days, etc., etc. But the threshold is so high that, and we've got to be dead straight on this one and not play any politics. For most weekends that I can envisage, it wouldn't reach the threshold, and I don't think we would get Home Secretary sign-off. However, that doesn't mean that people can misbehave. You know, in the coming weekends, we may well expect a similar sort of demonstration, and we will have a significant number of resources, and we need to enforce the law, and that's what we intend to do. Now, it's not always easy to do it that second in the heat of the moment, but we have got a very strong track record in the last few years of setting a very clear line of behaviour that people can do, and if people step over that, either at the time, if we can, we'll enforce the law. That's what you pay us for. That's what we're here to do. Or we will follow up because there's good CCTV coverage, etc. What we can't ban, even if it reached the Home Secretary's standard, what we can't ban is a static protest. There is we can restrict numbers, we can do a lot of things, but in practical terms, people have a fundamental right to a static protest. So it all gets quite complicated. I suppose the takeaway is we will scale up and we will resource to what is posed to the public in the city centre. We've done it for the last 5 years, every weekend. We'll keep doing that, and we'll just keep have to talk together. But it is part of democracy, isn't it? The good parts, the bad parts. It's a basic part of democracy.
Clear and very passionate actually about where we stand on this, because we do defend the right to peaceful, lawful, legitimate protest, and we don't tolerate criminality, and that's why we have a robust police presence available every single weekend, because we have a demonstration of some sort every single weekend in Manchester. And it kind of goes to the other question that was asked, which is about the cost of all of this. Sorry to be now a bit more prosaic. We've spent millions of pounds in the last 2.5 years policing protest in Greater Manchester. You, the council taxpayers, are paying for people to exercise that democratic right. But we've not had a penny of help from national government for that cost, unlike the Metropolitan Police, who get millions. However, and this goes to the point about the budget, despite that funding pressure and other funding pressures that we face in Greater Manchester, which meant that in January we did have that £30 million budget shortfall to plug, I can tell you that this week we were able to present a balanced budget for Greater Manchester Police for 26-27 to our police and fire panel. That's the panel of councillors who oversee police and fire spending. And we've done that through a whole series of really difficult choices. For example, we would have liked to put more money aside for reserves for a rainy day. We just can't do that next year. We have seen a significant reduction in the number of police staff. 1,000 fewer police staff than we had a couple of years ago. We've protected the number of police officers and will continue to do that. We can't really cut many more police staff without it beginning really to impact on service to the public, the speed at which we pick up the phone if you dial 999 or come out on a call. We've made savings as much as we can across every single budget line in Greater Manchester. It's been really tough. We've done it for 26-27. We're saying to government, we've run out of road now. We won't be able to do this again unless you help us. And that's what Andy and I have been saying to the Home Secretary.
That's okay.
Right, a few people have put their hands up at the back. I've been watching, you know, like bar staff do when who's at the bar first. It's the guy in the centre there is first, I think.
Hi. So at the last question time, right at the very end, you gave quite an impassioned speech about some claims that were made against you in relation to grooming gangs. Obviously, all eyes were sort of on the Manchester region last month for the by-election, and I think it's fair to say that there were some questionable claims and tactics made across the political spectrum during that. I think it doesn't really matter what side you're on politically. I think there's no denying that come the May elections, the country, the region, and probably a lot of the councils are going to be, let's say, a lot more multicoloured than they were previously. So as the person sort of at the very top of the pyramid almost for Greater Manchester, how can you assure voters and constituents that it's not going to become just a political battle? It's going to maintain about the issues that we vote for and the issues that matter to all of us, rather than just a fight against people of a different political colour?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, I gave an impassioned answer on grooming gangs, just for those who didn't follow that question time, because I'm fed up of the lies that are told on social media for purely divisive political reasons. They say all kinds of things about me and what I'm... 2 weeks into this job, I commissioned the biggest review of grooming that this country has seen into Manchester, into Oldham, Rochdale, and then the overall system. Because I would never turn away where you know, the safety of girls is at risk in Greater Manchester. And as a result of those reviews, Terry could stand up again and confirm this, there are major police investigations that were reopened and have locked up people who would otherwise have got away with it. And it's just why the kind of nature of political discourse these days on social media, people just have a parallel fact base and they think they can just throw it at you constantly, hence the impassioned sort of comment. And I'm happy to answer any points that people want to raise on that particular issue. But it feels to me that that's the issue with where politics is going. It's becoming so toxic, so divisive, and I've seen that change in my 25 years as an elected representative of Greater Manchester. Now, I could get down in the gutter with them and slug it out there, but I try not to do that, and I can look you in the eye and say, in my 9 years as Mayor of Greater Manchester, I have operated on a place first rather than party first principle. I call, as Kate was just saying, I call my own government out. You know, maybe that's why my paths are a little blocked these days when I seek to do things. But because I've put the place first, and I put solutions first. I've worked with the Conservatives here in Bolton, in Stockport, the Lib Dem leader of Stockport. And that's how I think politics should be, solutions focused, as we've discussed tonight. We've had a good exchange, but it should be place first, not party first. And I will fight anyone who comes in and tries to do the point scoring and pull down what we've created at Greater Manchester, which is a cross-party approach to improving the city region. We wouldn't be growing in the way that I described before if investors saw all of this political instability, all the abusive sort of culture, because we are the place that does things in a really positive way, cross-party way, long-term way. That's why we're succeeding. And I'm not going to let anyone come in here and tear that down.
Hi, Andy. You're being quite recognised across the nation for being very people-centric in your council approach. And we'd like to take that one step further. I am going to don a hat to represent the hatters of Manchester and Stockport, one of the largest industries that supplied headwear across the world.
I thought this was Stockport FC. This was Stockport County. No,
well,
is that
this is it. So, yeah, I work at the Hat Museum, so I'm a little bit partial. What I'd like to suggest is all social unrest can and is recognised as being managed, much as any craft. I worked in employee relations in Network Rail for 7 years, and you are constantly working as a valve to allow worker voice to mitigate unrest. It's quite straightforward. We don't need oppression or controls or policing. People have a grievance that's not being heard. Could we get a citizens' assembly back in situ, a GM citizens' assembly? We have had them in the past. I think they'd be quite effective at this time. It'd be a rotational panel of people who are dying to be involved in some of these decisions being made. It's minimal cost with maximum benefits.
Oh, well said. I mean, I like to think that's how we do build things. It's effectively what you say. So I mentioned the 9:30 rule on older and disabled people's bus passes. Now, I could sit here and say, oh, and that was all my idea, and well, maybe I gave that and tried to give, maybe I looked like I was giving that impression before. I will apologise if that was the case, because that idea came from our older people's equality panel and our disabled people's panel. So that is kind of what you are saying. And that is true of many of the ideas. You know, the R-Pass, actually, young people started calling for free bus travel. And I'm going to make a claim now, but I'm going to stand by it. In the last decade, as the country has become more dysfunctional, I think Greater Manchester has become more and more functional. And we've booked something of the trend of the way the country has gone. And I think we really got a hold to what we're doing. But the thing is, I understand why people have that alienation. Because, you know, they look around and bills are going up, the housing, as was described before, no one's accountable, and, you know, you can't, you know, the transport system, hopefully that's a thing of the past here more and more, but, you know, it doesn't work in the way that I want, and some of what was said at the start around the lack of services. I get the way people feel, but I think it's linked to what the gentleman said near the front. As a country, we gave up control of all of those essential things for people, the water, the energy, the electricity, the housing, the transport. And I think we've really got to the point where we're reaping a really bad dividend from that. And it's all about getting people back, getting things working for people again rather than working for profit. And that, the buses shows that. The fares here used to be over £4 for a single bus fare in Greater Manchester. You do not have to go back that long for that to have been the case. We are one of the few places now with a £2 fare cap, and that is going to be in place all of this year. Why? Because we put them under public control. And if more people ride on the buses, the profits from that come back to keeping the fares low. And I absolutely, you know, I agree with what you're saying. We've got, people feel powerless, don't they? That their lives are no good and everything, nothing can be changed. But I think it's about taking what we're doing and applying it on a much bigger scale to get hold of the basics again for people and make them work for communities.
It's been decades now. London's fare cap was £1.50, decades. Also, just to say, again, referring to the hatters, this industry employed 80,000 people at its peak, and Christie's closed in 1997. We have not had supplementary employment provided. We also have one of the most creative and innovative bands of engineers across the north, most of them unqualified, most of them without maths or English. These are the people who created our railways and our canal systems, and they're not being recognised. And just to say on that note, cotton mill descendants and hat factory descendants en masse are being pushed into transactional roles that do not meet the talent that they have. There is a lot of frustration, and social unrest will undoubtedly ensue if they do not get a voice. A rotating panel of people with a very passionate love for their area must hopefully be a sensible choice.
Oh, I get where you're coming from completely. And just to say in some way to answer the big points you've made, two things happened in this country in the 80s and then into the 90s that I think were disastrous. One was deindustrialization, without anything else to come in and replace it in the industries that you're describing. The second was, and this is the government that I was associated with, although I didn't agree with this policy, was in response to that, there was then a 50% target for university, but then nothing about technical qualifications, trades. The idea that the service economy will then replace everything and I don't think it was ever right that the government of that time basically had nothing to say to the other 50% who wanted something alternative to university. And I'm trying to put that right. So it's called the Greater Manchester Baccalaureate, the MBAC, which is about technical pathways, supported pathways for young people who are neurodiverse, autistic, everybody with a pathway into a qualification and into a job. And, we are building a new industrial base for Greater Manchester. We've got it's going to be a clean energy cluster not far from here in Carrington that's being built. We've got Atom Valley, which is a manufacturing cluster in Rochdale. Media City is already a cluster. Oxford Road Life Sciences and the city centre is our digital and tech cluster. We've got to build new pathways for our residents into the areas where we've got the best jobs. And that is part of our vision in the next decade. But it's critical about equal status for technical education. And I've been a bit of a lone voice on this, but I'll never stop on it. Because the way I always describe Greater Manchester, if the kids can see the skyscrapers but no path for them to a kind of an opportunity in the city or nearby, then the alienation that you talk about will only grow, won't it? And that's what we're talking about, a decade of good growth here. And that's what we're planning to do, 2025 to 2035. That means everybody with a good home, everybody with a good job, everybody with good transport in their community to connect them to the opportunity. That is what we're trying to achieve. I know it's not all in place there, but I hope people can see the path that we're on and what we're trying to do for everybody who lives here.
Okay, with an eye on the time, we'll go to the gentleman on the end.
Just going back to the protests, the far left obviously do them every weekend and they go peacefully, all nicely. The far right come along and we all know they like a bit of a fight, the EDL, full of idiots. The problem seems to be when there's a counter-protest. So surely when that's happening, that can be stopped or they can be kept apart. The police can keep one group on one side of the city, the other group on the other side of the city. It's when they meet, there's always going to be a fight. So surely something could be put in place to keep them apart, because that's the only time the fighting happens, when there's a counter-protest. Secondly, I believe it's called a Section 51A. One of the officers will be able to tell me if I'm wrong, but wearing face masks in public during these protests, surely if no one's allowed a face mask, there's going to be less trouble, because they're going to be scared of being identified. So can they not be put in place? Again, it might not be a 51A, but there is something that says you can't wear a face covering.
I think you're talking great sense. I mean, they do try and do that, GMP. I'm going to give the microphone to Terry. And I generally agree with you on it's more on one side than another. But I think on both sides, sometimes people are looking for confrontation, is the truth. And, GMP then have to try and deal with that. But, on the face coverings, I agree with you. That means they're coming in to cause trouble, doesn't it? In effect, is what that means. But Terry, you know the law here better than me.
Hopefully.
Otherwise, he's definitely not the second. He'd be the second best deputy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a politician. Police without fear of favour, and I've done it a long time, and I've been in public order policing a long time. The truth is, there's badness on both sides, and that's always been the case. It probably always will be. You get extremes within both opinions, and the weekend we're talking about, certainly my officers felt in equal measure from both sides, actually. Certainly around them getting assaulted. It wasn't purely one side. There was some appalling behaviour. But, you know, that's extremes from both sides. That's just life, isn't it? Our intent is always to keep people apart. And if you look at the most recent pro-Iranian regime, anti-Iranian regime, for want of better words, in the last 7 days or so, both sides of different opinions were allowed to voice their opinions, and we were in the middle. We normally are. So our sort of strategic intent every weekend, and we get this every week, like I said, for 5 years now, every single weekend in Manchester City Centre, we are stood in the middle of people with different views. Our operational and strategic intent is to keep people apart. Sometimes, if the volumes are such, it's a difficult job, and they do the best, and we get the horses, and etc., etc. And sometimes there's clashes. And then we reflect on the numbers, and we'll increase them next time those two groups appear, and that's what we'll do. In respect of face masks, it's 60 AA is one of the powers round. So I think I've passed in respect to that. And we often do put that legislation in place, particularly when we do search powers under Section 60. There's a practicality as well in that if we've got 100 officers and 10,000 people protesting, there's only so much effect you can have in practical terms with the face mask. And what we try and do then is some tactical interventions on people where we'll have the biggest effect. But there is a practicality. If you've got 10,000 people with face masks, you need 10,000 cops to sort that out, and that's not the reality on most. But we do, and I've got some examples where we do take action. Personally, I don't think it should be allowed. I think it's quite a weird situation that society's got themselves in respect to the face mask. And I can see it from the public point of view. I'm sure it seems pretty crackers, actually. We do have powers, but we've got to be practical on how we do it. My last one on it, which we've not mentioned today, but again, just a really honest opinion, and certainly with Andy and others, there's a third factor now in protest that arguably is worse than both sides, on the extremes of both sides, I should say. And it's a word that's more commonly known. I'm not sure it's the right one to use, but auditors. So what we find in most weekends is people who are videoing, old-fashioned term, but videoing what's going on for financial gain, who are actively trying to wind people up to get a reaction. And that is starting to be the catalyst that's actually causing us a problem. I was goal cover I goal cover a lot, but 6 or 7 weekends ago I was goal cover, and we had 40 auditors at the front lines winding people up. Now, we put conditions on those people, but I think there's an X factor developing in UK society at the minute around protest, and it's not helping at all. I'm not sure what use it has. But actually, the auditors in London and Manchester and Birmingham at the minute are arguably the people that are winding what possibly could be decent people up who've got a view and are starting to inflame things. And that's where we're really focusing in at the minute. They're a massive problem that we're looking at.
It's partly money, isn't it? But they're also trying to get content that they then endlessly say, oh, Manchester's going down the pan, it looks like the third world, and you know, it's got a political element to it as well, and you know, that's what they're doing. And I just feel, you know, the answer to this is partly to just people to get away from screens more and more, isn't it? You know, it's just driving this polarisation, isn't it? And this kind of public discourse that's just, I don't know, it's not healthy, is it, at all? It feels to me. So, yeah, GMP have a really tough job with it, but thanks for your question. And on the whole, we would try and follow what you were saying.
Right, we're going to end on a high, actually. Have we got any golf fans in the house? Yeah, we're just hearing that Greater Manchester's putting a bid in to be the biggest ever Ryder Cup, 1.2 billion benefit to the economy. Greater Manchester's really...
I'm looking at your faces to think, is this a real one? It is a real one, yeah.
It is a real one, yeah, the Ryder Cup. And we've just had the Brits. Greater Manchester's really playing home to some big events now, isn't it? As you say, we're making a mark for ourselves.
Yeah, so it's a real announcement. So look out tomorrow. There's going to be a big package of investment coming forward from our Good Growth Fund. And this goes back to what we've been saying tonight. You know, we want new investment, and it's going to come to Trafford as well. Carrington is getting the Relief Road. Carrington Relief Road will be announced tomorrow. Obviously, I hear you've got a cinema opening in Stretford tonight, and you're all here. And I feel so... it's Friday, sorry, I think it's opening, isn't it? So maybe you wouldn't have been here if it had opened tonight. Jane, I can see you. But yeah, I mean, what we're doing is we're sort of making sure it's the borough's turn now. You know, the city, as I said before, has really come through. But now the investment is spreading, and we want it to come with apprenticeships. That's what good growth means, you know, good employment. But as part of it, we have a very realistic bid for the Ryder Cup in 2035 technically in Bolton, but it's a Greater Manchester Ryder Cup, in effect, is what we're trying to bring off. And I wouldn't be saying it if it wasn't a credible and serious thing. And actually, alongside it, we are, and you know, big thing to raise right near the end, Old Trafford regeneration. But if we can bring that through in the way that, you know, we hope, we are also aiming for the FIFA Women's World Cup at the new Old Trafford in 2035. So these are ambitions that are very, very soundly based. We know we can do it. We are confirming tomorrow that we are submitting a bid to the European Tour for the 2035 Ryder Cup, and I'm hopeful that we can land it. You know, we don't go out there randomly on these things. We went for the Brits, we got it. It's here again next year. We pulled it off. We're going for the Ryder Cup. I hope I'll be here in a few months' time to say, and we've got it. And the success of Greater Manchester keeps on building. But I just think it's brilliant that you're all here tonight, and the way that we've had this conversation, you're interested in what's going on. I know there's things that we need to take back and do more, and I know everything's not perfect, because, you know, it's not. However, this is the place to be, I think, in the country right now. We're showing other places how things can be done. You know, we have built it from the bottom up with people, and it will always be like that. And you might well be stuck with me now that I'm Mr. Blocked. So whether that's good news or bad news, I don't know. But I think, you know, it's just a fantastic thing to see, isn't it? You know, I left this place in my early 20s because there were just no jobs here. I had to go south to get on in life, and loads of people did. Now we have a net inflow of young people from other parts of the country and London coming to live here. And that is the change in 30 years, and we're only just getting started, honestly. And I can see the change that Tom and his team are bringing to the borough. I think you've got an outstanding leader of this council in Tom Ross. That's my experience, honest view, having worked with him closely. He is one of, you know, the most decent, principled, but also effective people in politics. And yeah, this borough, with all of the things that we're planning together, is definitely in a good place to be part of this decade of good growth. So thank you, everybody, for being here tonight and your questions. Sorry I couldn't get around all of them. Can still see a couple of hands up, but I think we're probably out of time. But yeah, get your golf gear on and get ready for the Ryder Cup.
Round of applause, please, for Andy Burnham. Thank you. If everybody could just stay in their seats while we vacate, that would be great. Thank you very much.